getting ready to go here. So just get folks to load on. Let's see if I'm on the screen. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. A little bit of a late beginning as opposed to what I do during the week, which is at 6 o'clock Eastern Time on most nights. But it's a Saturday night. We took it easy today, so we've got some time. We're going to take a look at what's going on. Hi to Dio, to 99 Wolves. Haven't seen you in a bit. Good to see you. James NASCAR, Danielo Yakubov. You are not going to see much of any snow in Northeast New Jersey on Super Bowl Sunday there, Danielo. Brandon, hi back to you. Good to see everybody jumping on one at a time. I felt up to it, Corey, so we're going to do it. And Joshua Pan, John Searle, Weather Enlow, John Schultz, hello to everybody as we're piling on board. Pretty interesting weather pattern developing over the next couple of weeks, I think. And yes, there might be a freezing rain potential near north and west of the D.C. area. FJ40J Love, go. Oh, that reminds me. I have to wear my Super Bowl champion hat from the New York Giants back from Super Bowl, what was that? XL 46. There you go. I'm ready. Okay, you can tell as a Giant fan that I have my two worst choices here. So I will take the lesser of two evils. I'll probably be rooting for the Eagles, but not with a whole lot of passion. Okay. And by the way, let me just show you real quick. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. I'm going to just show you what I'm putting together tomorrow. So I don't know if you guys can see it here, but this is a pork shoulder. Okay, it's an 11, almost 12-pound pork shoulder, and it is now out of the fridge and sitting at room temperature. It's going to go in the oven at midnight tonight and cook all night and tomorrow morning at 200 degrees. Very easy to do if you ever want to try it and make it. The key is to slow cook it, and I mean very slow cooking. An hour for every pound at about 200 degrees. And what you do is you get it a day or two before. Coarse kosher salt. Be very generous with your seasonings. Coarse kosher salt all the way around it. Granulated garlic, paprika, rosemary, sage, and a little light rubbing of extra virgin olive oil. You let it sit out at room temperature for a couple of hours. Put it in the fridge. Take it out the next day. Season it a little bit more. Let it sit out at room temperature for an hour or two, back in the fridge, and then take it out right before you're going to put it in the oven for about an hour or two at room temperature. Put it in the oven, and again, it's an hour a pound. So it goes in at midnight. It's out of the oven at noon tomorrow. Then you let it sit and rest for an hour and a half, and then you get a fork, and it pulls. Literally, the pork will pull right off the bone. It is amazing. So if you ever want to try that, by all means. And if you can't, if you need a reminder one day, just send me a message and I'll go over it with you on how to make it. It's the best pulled pork. And then if you want to put some barbecue sauce on it, you can do that afterwards. Don't do it while it's cooking. Let it cook without it, and then put on some BBQ sauce. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on tonight, because we do have the next in a series of waves of low pressure that are coming out of the west. We've gotten into this rather busy pattern, and it doesn't necessarily mean for snow lovers that it's going to be productive, but nonetheless, it is a busy pattern, and sometimes out of busy patterns you can get surprises along the way. I don't think tomorrow will be much of one of those days in terms of surprises. But as far as advisories go, we have advisories up around the Great Lakes for some snow that's going to fall overnight. And we have winter weather advisories up for much of Pennsylvania except for the extreme west and the extreme east, the extreme southeast. We do have advisories up for northeastern Pennsylvania up into the Catskills. We also are probably going to see advisories go up on Sunday for upstate New York and New England, and there probably will be a peppering of winter storm warnings as well. And we do have winter storm warnings up for a good chunk of the state of Montana, with winter weather advisories surrounding it. And with the light blue, I believe that's a wind chill advisory in the light blue. Let me just double check on the scale, and I can't seem to find it, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. So we'll go to what's happening at the moment radar-wise, and at least as far as the Northeast is concerned, we don't have too much happening here. You can see it here on the Northeast radar view, and you can just start to begin to see some precipitation showing up here. This is as of 9 p.m. Eastern time. So let's go through what's going to happen here with all of this, and we'll bring up the trusty old GFS to go over this busy week that we're going to have ahead, because we've got a couple of waves of low pressure that we're going to be looking at going forward. And I also think, over the longer term, the pattern is going to, I think there are going to be some surprises in store. You might be surprised as to how this all turns out after we go back and look at this. And David Schwartz, you're coming up to a point that I'm going to make later on. We're going to talk about the teleconnections because they are seeming to get into line for something down the road, which we alluded to the last couple of days. But first things first, so here's that moisture that's coming out of the set. Oh, I jumped ahead. I'm one wave ahead. That's the moisture. I knew it didn't look right. But this is what we have going on at the moment with snow over the Great Lakes, north of Chicago, in most of Wisconsin and on up through Michigan and back through eastern Minnesota. That area is moving east. We've got some snow and some heavy snows in the darker blues up the northern Rockies here, going up into southwestern Canada. Some rain along the northwest coast of Washington, and we've got some rain that's developing in East Texas and across Louisiana. Now, as we move into Sunday, we're going to start to see cold air is going to get trapped along the Appalachians. And if you remember what we said yesterday with regards to a southwest wind, which is what we're going to have initially, at least, that is not the warmest of winds. Excuse me. You do wind up with cold air getting trapped. Models have caught on to this. The models have also tried to warm it up a bit too fast across the eastern part of the United States. So as a result, we've got the pink area by the GFS tomorrow morning showing some freezing rain over parts of northeastern Tennessee and back over into southeastern Kentucky, western North Carolina. This is why we have the advisory extending down even into the southern Appalachians. Snow over Ohio, Indiana, western Pennsylvania, and then starting to develop through western New York. As we go through the morning and into the afternoon, that moisture begins to swing to the east. We have one low that's moving over into southeastern Canada near Toronto, but there's going to be a secondary low that will eventually develop. Now, it's not going to be able to cut off the warm air that will move up the East Coast Sunday afternoon into Sunday night. You'll notice that the rain gets all the way up into southern Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. That straight southerly flow brings that warm air all the way up. But it will be snow across the interior in much of northwest Pennsylvania, up through upstate New York, and in at least through northern New England. Now, the secondary low, you can see the isobar starting to close off in eastern North Carolina. That is going to be the low that eventually will take over. Meanwhile, in the Rockies, we still have snows going on there through the overnight and into tomorrow. The next energy is getting ready to drop down, and then there you see a low in Wyoming during Monday morning. Here's that coastal low, and there might be some brief heavy rains for coastal New Jersey and southern New England with this. I think there could be some areas getting an inch to an inch and a quarter of rain out of this. And then it pulls away, and there's your low that's sitting going west of Nova Scotia Monday morning. More snows coming down into the northern Rockies and into the Central Plains. Low pressure drops down into New Mexico. Still got that dry streak intact at Amarillo, by the way. Then you start to see the second wave develop. And this is going to be coming out for Wednesday into Thursday. Now, one of the things that's happening is each one of these systems comes down and goes by. It brings the jet stream just a little bit further to the south, and it brings cold air a little bit further to the south. So this second wave is going to be further south than the one that's coming through now. So you've got a low that's on the Alabama-Georgia border. What winds up happening here in the east, there's a weak cold front that comes through here and stalls just to the south of New York City. And that's where the boundary is going to try to set up. You can see how the isobars are just kind of pointed right along the coast. Just north and west of that is where the snow line is. And this time around, it's going to be a little bit closer to coastal areas, but not quite. And as we move along, you know, that wave goes into eastern North Carolina and eventually moves off the Virginia coast. I think you can certainly make an argument there's going to be a northeast wind that will increase during later Wednesday night. Some cold air may try and come back and change the rain over to snow from Boston to New York City to Philadelphia. You see the models trying to do that as that wave goes by. If you wind up with an even flatter solution here, where cold air is more important, the problem with the flatter solution is that it's also a weaker solution. When we say flatter, we mean weaker, and as a result, you'll wind up perhaps with less precip. You can't really have it both ways in a case like this because everything's kind of progressing from west to east. You don't have the cold air holding on as you might have in a better setup. Now that moves out, and then as we go into next weekend, here's a third system that comes out of the Rockies, and this one heads further north toward the Great Lakes, but it's the same kind of deal here, where there's going to be a system that's going to move through the lakes with a cold front, and then another wave develops on the southern boundary in Louisiana here next weekend. Big high comes down into the Dakotas, and then that low is going to try and push off to the east. And again, this time around, it might be further south, a little flatter, a little more cold air. So you can see that the model's kind of generating some snow and sleet on the northern fringe of this precip band. You don't have a lot of cold air to work with. You've just got marginal cold air at best. But this is going to be yet another in the series of waves. It's too bad that you don't have, for snow lovers, you'd want a better setup, obviously, aloft. If you had a slightly better setup aloft, you might wind up with snow events out of these for many coastal areas instead of rain. But that's not the case at the moment. The cards that you deal with, the cards that you have. And here's another cold high that pushes down into the northern plains. Now we're into the week of February 12th, and that'll be eventually spreading into the eastern part of the United States. Let's jump to the teleconnections for the long range, because they were very, very interesting today. They are beginning to, point to what could be a rather fun second half of February and beyond, if everything that we're looking at comes to fruition here. Now, the indices are, the Pacific North America Index, which is negative until the 7th, then kind of pops a little positive, goes to neutral, and then notice after about the 11th, it shoots up to almost off-the-wall positive. So that is, you put a check mark there for the East Coast with something like this for the long range. The long range, okay? Now, the NAO, and look how crazy positive this is. And this is, about as far opposite of blocking as you can get. You've got it positive, and then it goes off the wall positive around the 9th of February. But notice what happens right after that. It crashes to neutral and even goes slightly negative by the time we get to February 17th. The models have been telegraphing this possibility over the last number of days when you look at the very broad spectrum of the atmosphere, that this might happen later in the month. And maybe this is going to be the time finally to see the NAO come into play for a few weeks, later February and for the beginning of March. And through all of this, by the way, the EPO is in the, I would put the check mark certainly in the wintertime, winter weather snow category. You put the check marks in that box too, as the EPO is negative, even gets strongly negative around the 7th, 8th, and then kind of goes back to neutral and then starts to trend down into negative territory again. So toward the end of this period, forecast period here, I think it could get very interesting. Maybe around President's Day might be something to think about. No guarantees from the management on these sorts of things. There's always going to be some volatility with these models, and we could come in tomorrow and see, a slightly different picture. In fact, I'm pretty sure that we will see it change somewhat, but the overall trends, I think, will remain intact through all of this. So I'm going to put up the upper air, and let's get the upper air analysis here going and show you where we're at. I'm going to start back a few days and bring it forward. You've got this trough in the east. One of the problems here is, and you can say, well, Joe, we've got this negative EPO and got this positive PNA at work. How come it's not producing what we think it should produce? Well, the problem is that the ridge in the west is off the west coast and not inland of the west coast. It needs to move at least 5, if not maybe 10 degrees further to the west in order for it to be effective here along the immediate coast. And in the meantime, when you look at the trough, the axis of the trough remains along or just east of 90 degrees west, and that is too far to the west. That causes those cold highs to go out underneath us instead of maybe going out to our north. The cold air retreats and pulls away, and until you get the trough and the ridge to kind of shift a little bit, you're not going to get any kind of big snowstorm events. Now, you're still seeing troughs rotating around. This is at day 5. Now, the trough axis is a little further east here. So is the ridge axis. It moves a little bit further east. You see this closed circle that comes into California. That upper high shifts eastward a little bit. That's probably the reason why we have, these next 2 waves tracking further south with a slightly flatter look. The trough in and of itself that's swinging around is not that impressive, so it's keeping things rather flat. That would be the only way really that you're going to get some snow out of this. And then as we move it along, going now into days 8, 9, and 10, you start to see that ridge in the west. You see how it starts to push in a little bit further inland? That is where you want to see it. Right here as we get to day, this is February 15th now. Now you got the ridge on the coast and pushing up into southwestern Canada. This is in a much more favorable place for snow for the coastal cities of the Northeast. And there's a trough at that point around February 15th. We know it probably won't look exactly like that, but the thing is that over time, you're going to see, I think you're going to see the ridge in the west move further east. The trough position is going to move further east as well for the eastern part of the U.S. And the other thing to watch is going to be blocking that's going to start developing. You can see there's a ridge that's trying to build across the Atlantic into northeastern Canada as we go toward the end of the period. May not exactly be there, but this seems to be transitioning over eventually into a rather interesting pattern, perhaps for the second half of the month. So that is something that we could look forward to. As far as snow is concerned, we'll take a look at the snowfall forecast. And I've been thinking that with this system for tomorrow, for Sunday, this is going to be generally in areas that get snow, a 3 to 6 inch snowfall. And we'll probably see a little bit more in some places. So we'll move it out here. And this is through Monday morning. And there you can see what the GFS produces is a pocket of 8 to 10 inch snows in north central New York, just north and west of I-90. And you've got some pockets of 6-inch plus in New Hampshire, in Vermont and New Hampshire, and also some pockets in Pennsylvania of some 4-inch plus snows. But again, just to the east of that, much except for northwest New Jersey, which has some snow maybe at the beginning, coastal areas are going to see nothing. And in fact, even in areas like in northwest Connecticut, much of Massachusetts, only maybe in western Mass, you might see some snow there. Into southeastern New Hampshire and southeastern Maine, you don't get much. Back through Ohio, it looks like 1 to 2 inches of snow across the Great Lakes with the weather system going by tonight and tomorrow. Some 2, 4, 5-inch amounts as you go further to the north. And I'll go a little wider so we can take a look at the outcome in the Rockies, because things are busy there with these waves coming through there from the onset. And you're getting some pretty hefty snows across Montana, on north and west into southwestern Canada. And moving it on to the next 10 days, the second wave, I think we can jump to we'll go to the 24-hour snowfall to take a look at what the second wave produces. Let's get a little tighter on the east first. And here's your 24-hour snowfall. So let me go back a little bit. So there's that. You actually, when you look at it in the standpoint of the 24-hour map, you can see how the snow areas move. And there's your first area with the wave for Sunday into Sunday night. Here's the second wave for the middle of the week. And here's how it lines up with respect to the Northeast. The snow's just inland of the coast, just north and west of the coast. There's a pretty solid band of let's call it 3 to 6, 4 to 8 inch snows. Maybe it won't take much. If we could have this a little bit colder and a little bit flatter, you could wind up having that area further south. And then as that third system evolves, and you can see it here, this one producing a narrow band of several inches of snow or a bit more from southwestern Pennsylvania across northern New Jersey, southeastern New York, but again, just inland of the coast because of the fact that there's going to be a question of how cold things actually are going to be when we get to that time frame, which is this point is a week from Monday, February 12th. February being a very short month, before you know it, it will be over with. Take a look at Europe, because I've been really getting very interested in how things work on the other side. But this looks like a rather wintry pattern is shaping up for the next few weeks over in Europe. You've got waves of rain and snow coming in early next week. You can see it here. Here's another system that comes into the British Isles, and you got that flow that's partly coming down from Greenland. Bit of a break, and here's another push as we move into the long range. In fact, there's one big Atlantic storm being indicated there, but that's, again, now we're way up in day 13, 14. But when we look at their 10-day snowfall totals, it's pretty impressive in some areas. You've got a big area of heavy snow over France and Spain, through the British Isles actually do quite well with all of this. But much of Europe getting some February action, and you've got that snows even down into northern Africa. So very, very interesting weather scenario developing. I'm really looking forward to seeing if this whole blocking thing, you have this big warming event going on in the stratosphere again, and this one is really impressive. The people that follow it have been making that point. I've said about it, it's not something that I've gotten my head around yet, but I'm trying to learn more and more about it and try to understand it better on how something that happens up at 50 millibars and 10 millibars, way up at almost the very top of the atmosphere, how that impacts weather systems on the bottom where we are, and trying to make connections between what goes on there and what goes on down here. But the upstream, the upper air, way up in the upper atmosphere, definitely signaling that there are going to be some interesting things that are going to happen down here on Earth where we roam. Nick Cortese, Daniel Dean, both of you, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's a quick commercial break that may run here for some of you, but just stick around and I'll be here, so just hang on. In the meantime, I'm just going to try to come back. I know a lot of you have come up with your Super Bowl predictions. So again, for New Yorkers who are Giants fans, this is the you're going to get the two teams that we dislike the most getting into the Super Bowl. So I would imagine that our passions are going to be low. Mary Atkins, yeah, you look pretty good for 3 to 6 inches there. Hope to get a midnight green version of that hat tomorrow. Oh, for the Eagles, yes. Hope so too for you, Corey. I know a lot of you guys that watch from New Jersey are Eagle fans, so I'm going to kind of be rooting for the Eagles to do it. New England has won it often enough. Let's have somebody else get it. And let me. You're making meatballs, David Schwartz, tomorrow. Good for you. I haven't made those in a while. The temp should be at 200 degrees if you ever do the pulled pork. And again, you point out about the NAO. I think that is going to happen. We're finally going to see the NAO make an appearance that has been lacking for the last 5 winters. We've had these occasional moments here and there where it's shown up. And in fact, we've had a number of instances over that time frame where the models have been forecasting it to happen, and then it doesn't happen. So I'm cautious with what I'm seeing, but every day seems to be getting a day. Every day we're getting one day closer, and the signals are all still there, and every bit as strong as they were a few days ago. Simrandeep Singh, how much snow in Westchester? Except at the very start, where you might see some sleet or snow. I don't think you're going to see much of anything. You're going to have to go north of Route 84 to see something out of this. And even there, I think it may have wind up changing over to rain. Just going to have to watch those surface temperatures for a while in the inland areas tomorrow morning until they get above freezing. Sometimes they can be stubborn and take their sweet time going up above 32, but the south wind should take care of it. And yet, no snow for Norfolk, weather and low. So, for now, you're going to be snowless through the first half of the month. You got to get that blocking pattern to get in there. And yeah, Jason, it is too early for Let's Go Mets. And we know where that's going too with the Mets. It'll be another season of frustration for Met fans. I know so many Met fans that are also New York Jet fans. And my boy, that's got to be the most frustrating combination that there is. James Taylor, Mid-Michigan by Monday morning. I'm thinking 2 to 4, 3 to 5 up your way. There'll be some pockets of 6-inch plus snows as well. Don't give up, Anthony Kuntala. And I hope you're feeling better. I know you've been having some issues lately. If we get into this blocking pattern, you may get some surprises there on the Jersey Shore. This has been a very interesting winter for coastal New Jersey because all the snow events, usually on the Jersey Shore, the wind off the water changes it to rain quickly, unless the wind is north, 04, 03. Once it starts going closer to 05 or anything else, it goes to rain almost immediately. Well, you've got a winter here where just about every snow event has been all snow, which is rather remarkable that you haven't had any mixing or rain issues during those snow events. The icon for tomorrow is pretty consistent with all the others, TechMan 330. I don't think you're going to see any surprises with respect to that. I'm going to just let me see if I can pull up the SREF. The SREF only goes out 96 hours, so you're not going to be able to see too much out of it. It's a little early to get clues about the middle of the week. And I can pretty well assure you that it's not going to show much of anything with respect to tomorrow. And indeed, I'm going to see if I can find, how far north do I have to go to find snow. All right, Poughkeepsie. I mean, even Poughkeepsie, okay, and that's pretty far inland. That's north of 84. Only doesn't even 0.04 inches of snow. So that's barely a handful of flakes, not even a tenth of an inch. Monticello forecasting 1.32, and that's up in the Catskills. The Weather Service is going 2 to 5 for that area. I'm not so sure if that's the case. 2 inches in Scranton in Northeast PA. Binghamton, about 2. North and west of Utica, this is where you start to get into some heavier amounts, 4.38. Syracuse, just a little bit over 2 in Syracuse. Watertown, a little over 4. And this is, I don't know what spot that is north of the Adirondacks. They only get 3. Montpelier in Vermont, 3. Rutland, 4. Keene in New Hampshire, not even half an inch there of snow. So, you know, the SREF model is very underwhelming as opposed to what the other models are indicating. Norfolk, Virginia's average snowfall per year is I got to think it's under 4 inches. I'll have to go back and look it up, but it's very, very low. It might even be less than that. Let's see. Baltimore, rain. That's what for Daniel Dean. You're getting rain. Will I get a foot of snow by Wednesday in Chicago? Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Let me go back and refresh my memory with what was being indicated. You guys in Chicago have really missed out on a lot of this stuff. Well, I mean, the bulk of the 10-day snowfall is, way, north of you. The 10-day snowfall on the GFS, the band of 8 to 12 is north of you. But, as far as Wednesday is concerned, we just back it up. Let's see. Well, you've got an inch up until Monday and then another couple of inches after that. So you might have to settle for 2 or 3 inches for Chicago and not much more than that with the next wave. 7 to 8 snow inches a year for Norfolk. Okay, I can buy that. I guess right along the immediate coast, it probably is far less. And Chicago has. Let me tell you an interesting statistic about Chicago, by the way. Which I found it was fascinating. Between 1979 and 1997, 18 years, Chicago went 18 years without seeing a single snowfall of more than 10 inches. That's a remarkable statistic. So if you are thinking that you're in a snow drought and you're not old enough to go back to 1978 to 1997, that's a snow drought. That is a long, long time to go without a storm producing a foot of snow. Probably I'm sure there were a number of, I don't know how many of those years the snow in Chicago were below average, but obviously those years were peppered with moderate events, maybe a bunch of moderate events as opposed to 1 or 2 big events. Whereas, on my neck of the woods, the last 18 years have been, there's been snow. In fact, we've had one snowstorm of a foot or more produced every year for most of this area, starting in 2012, 2013, the last six consecutive years. And when you go back before that toward 2000, there were a number of years in that 2000 to 2012 stretch where there were 2. And I think there might have been 2 of those years where we had 3. So, it goes in cycles. Sometimes you get a whole bunch over a period of a couple of decades, and then you go, a period of 10 or 20 years where you don't see much of anything at all in terms of big events. Matthew Goodman, Dover hasn't seen much snow so far this year. You got to get that. We're at the point now where you're going to have to get that blocking pattern to really set up in order to have the cold air pinned in and get a storm to go to your south. We're getting into February now, and before too long, we're going to be into March. So, we're going to have to start looking at more traditional weather patterns with respect to snows. When you get down into the mid-Atlantic states, you're going to need that negative NAO, and you're going to need that blocking pattern to set up. All right, folks, so let's call it a night on this Saturday night. Enjoy your Super Bowl on Sunday. Maybe tomorrow will be the day I take off. We'll see. Either that, or if I do a broadcast, I might do one late tomorrow morning after the GFS is done. So perhaps around noontime, we'll get a live stream done. And this way, we'll have the new GFS model to look at. We'll do a little bit of analysis. We'll see what's going on with respect to the weather at the moment, and speculate, of course, to what might happen down the road. And then you guys can just watch the Super Bowl tomorrow night and enjoy yourselves. Don't forget, you can check out website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and, of course, on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. The links for all of that are right here on my YouTube channel. They're usually, I think they lie right across the bottom, the banner on my channel page, and you can link to that. If you didn't see it, Reaver 501, let me show you what I'm doing for tomorrow. So I've got a 12-pound. Let me get my, see how I am with respect to the camera. Hang on here. Okay, so there you go. There's my, this is almost a 12-pound pork shoulder. Okay, very, very easy to make, and it's awesome the way it comes out. Put this down because this thing weighs. Okay, so season it. Coarse kosher salt, granulated garlic, paprika. Be very generous with your seasoning. Some sage, some rosemary. Rub it with a little extra virgin olive oil. You let it sit after you season it at room temperature for about an hour and a half. Put it in the fridge overnight. Take it out the next morning, season it again, put it back in the fridge, and let it sit. Wrap it up in some kind of saran wrap when you do that, when it's in the fridge. And then when you take it out right before you cook, you unwrap it, you let it sit at room temperature for about an hour and a half, because that gets the kosher salt, works on the meat, gets it, breaks it down. Into the oven. This is going into the oven at midnight tonight at 200 degrees. Very, very low temperature. Cooks very, very slowly. 1 hour per pound. So by noon tomorrow, it's done. You take it out. You let it rest for an hour to an hour and a half. And then you just take 2 forks and the meat just pulls right off the bone. It's amazing. And then after you do that, if you want to put a little barbecue sauce on it, that is your choice. I do not cook it with the barbecue sauce. It's too sweet, and it's not my thing. If you want to add it afterward, that is an option. But don't add it while it's cooking. But the key is 200 degrees, an hour per pound. So it puts it in at midnight. At noon tomorrow, it's done, and it's ready to eat. You can just keep it warm for the rest of the day, and when it's ready to go, you're done. It's awesome, and you will get rave reviews from all your guests. All right, folks, enjoy your day on Sunday. Again, we'll shoot for noon tomorrow for a quick live stream. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you on Super Bowl Sunday.